아래데 아니 세배다 아니 팀에 호드미 참 균이고 되어지 안지 차제 즉 디리라 차버리 되네죠 즉 됐어 영원히 relation is 잡는 거 같아 되네 배도한테 투치스
So firstly, I want to say welcome back to the retreatants who have been away doing Vajrayogini retreat. So to the yoginis, welcome. It's good to have you back. I must say I'm impressed by your strength of mind, your fortitude, that after engaging in retreat now for some weeks, yet on the morning, this morning when you did fire puja, this evening, you're back here tonight, and for Venerable Tsepel, saying as per usual, as if in the last few weeks you hadn't been away but had been here. But nevertheless, welcome back. Welcome to you and to Drime and to the other yogins for returning.
단 연주기 전주 심기 군내라지 80주기 냠내 지고고래 전주 선반남기 80주기 냠내 지고로 대자당 아주 80주기 냠내 있는데随便 냠내 제당골 마시고래 제자다 随便 냠내 제발이야 한 김천 망보도 신의 삼단제 수보공 검야기도 신의 제고래에서다 가지고 수보공 그 김천 삼단하디게 되순고래 제당 아주 계신 주야리야 하는 빛이 미식리야 라고 세텔이야 소주지 얘기 아니 네바지 포바 있나 아니 디 라고 제제 아니 소주 다 소주 바디 네바디나 팔루에 나바 있나 다그 라고 제데 나자 따야다 세텔이야 다 라고 미베 강라 동화 주요르데 데 동화 딜레데다 소도 레지 타와드 빼야고래 셈비게 가오 고메디 용구로 와스 그래서는 소도 마다와제 된 체리 되어 있는 데리야 개와사야 용구래 아니 지금 디봉계로 제 용구래 되네 진짜다 되네게 가고 뭐 용구로 와서 아니 니래 디나신당 안주게 체데리야 안주게 강아 제동아 같이 여배나 데 동아디게 지게 녀위 동아다 되네 제배다 동아 충충을 수요모도 가요 말레스 두스네 삼다제 아니 현기 현리야 아니 지금 수보kom이 알아서 것도 진짜 오래해서 근데 수보 먹으면 코르기기로 코르기는 디바사 디비교 디디고 동안용고 차그래 대자다 세들이야 동안한테 중요한데 배 충주를 삼다 저거 오래해서 가서 그신 디네고 쉬루와
So continuing to look at the chapter from Shantideva's engaging in the Bodhisattva's way of life on the practice of patience. And this is a text composed for great beings, for Bodhisattvas. So it's presented for those who have cultivated bodhicitta, and thereby, with patience conjoined with bodhicitta, it becomes suitable to be called a perfection. In that, through the bodhisattva practicing the perfections, such as patience, the bodhisattva will eventually become a Buddha, and thereby this quality of patience will become perfected. So the very purpose of a bodhisattva practicing patience is so as to aid their cultivation of all the good qualities required to become a Buddha for the sake of others. So for us as aspirants, we follow in their footsteps and we try and emulate them, trying to cultivate bodhicitta and certainly trying to cultivate patience. In order to cultivate patience, whether as ordinary beings as ourselves, or to maintain it and develop it further, which is what the bodhisattva would be doing, one needs to rely on many reasons. Hence this verse has so many verses, hence this chapter has so many verses, because within this is reason after reason after reason for one to use in analytical meditation to strengthen one's understanding of how to deal with adverse circumstances. So last week in the 72nd verse and the 73rd verse, we looked at an illustration that presented that whilst it is of course a hideous punishment to have a limb such as an arm amputated, on the other hand, that certainly is preferable to being executed. And the meaning, as we saw, is whilst no one wants to experience suffering, if one experiences problems and hardships and difficulties as a practitioner, as a human being, one is exhausting negative karma. And it is certainly preferable to exhaust that negative karma in our human life rather than having it propel a rebirth in the lower realms. Moreover, if we are skilled, if we, through relying on reasoning, we are skilled in the practice of patience, that means we'll be skilled in transforming problems into the path to enlightenment, which means we aren't only exhausting non-virtue, but we are accumulating virtue. Whereas for someone who's not skilled in patience, they are unable to transform adversities into the path to enlightenment, and they, whilst also exhausting non-virtue, end up creating a non-virtue anew because they respond in an habitual way, an afflicted way, through anger and so forth. So this is why so many reasons are presented, and these we need to learn and reflect on again and again, so that the response of patience becomes our natural response.
And then the Subukum like the Chesa mission that you Susugi, Notri Meba, Susugi, Notri Meba, Gun Meba, Jigliam, mission that you socially Gun Zuja, Nick, Jik Pa Jebaina, down to Garsimos, oh, Notri Me, Gun Meba Chilia, Malakunju, sitting Jebating, a Carson Subukum, or Cocal Lanja or my Subukum, and I don't like to us and begin so. 지게 삼문하는 아주 용고래. 그러나 제가 디네 자다 나도 세고 검라도 랑기 균 매바질은 너도 매바질에 생기 균수지 구마 매바로 구마도 디네 균시베나 딜레 마제죠 용쿠르쇼스 용키네 되셔서 이거 말이야. 세고 검세도 편이 균수로도 셈마지베 지교 말이라고 셈마지베 셈마도 셈마지베 차도 이 미대와서야지 이 미대와서도 콘을난 거래. 제가 셈마지베 파 콘을나지 콘을나교 말이라고 그래서 세고 검세도 제가 셈마지베 콘을 말하지 되투바 제고래 예제래. 제가 콘을나바 있나 소수기 디바사 찍지 너 콘을나바 있나 소수기 남주 비주 다이게 봐 야보 비주 다두고 말이야. 제가도 콘을나교 말에 셈마지베 콘을나교 말에 두스네 되고래서 콘을마라고 되고래 되투바 제고래서 세보검스 닐라고래. 마도 소수리아 너를 매바질에 구마 마제베 구마를 균지제베나 디파 소수기 김세 시에제 구마 마제가 구마 말에 이메비 김세 두수제 라드에 제야다 데네 렌로아디 소수 톱다 렌로호르와데 데 제자디 코로나시 코로마라와제 셈로디 보제 셈르레제 소 코로마라와제 데네 소수기 김세 야다바 시에다 두신 파 렌제 렌점나디 고르마도 디 렌마제제 빼지 용케네 되셔시고 말에 제가 망부치기 데니게 세고 공부를 고 소물서데 어떤 너트 매워지려 가지 진지데 나지 용케네 되반데 나 용으로 와다니 내 너트 맞으면 나 너트 진짜 가르친 켈린 거라서 삼로 연구도 같이 세고 공부해야지 되스 지게 야부라지 고어로 따따서 하면 어디 데니시 연구도 제가 데니게 세트업 여바 있는 데니 소소이 템베도 아니죠 다 데니게 아직 디멤비게 아직 현대의 지금 여러가지 지금 전에 수술량을 그 코로나라지 거의 강아지에 탑람 비주다 탑람 비주다네 탑람 비 탑시다면은 거는 그런 걸람나라 샤샤로 와다 두시네 샤샤 차고로 와 그래서 되네 자디 대세부 검수디 수수에 셈마이 파줘라도 셈마이 집어 맞춰봐지 파 코로나교 말해서 왔다 되네 디레.
The practice of patience is not something that is easy to do. It is really challenging. We see it here presented for how Bodhisattvas should be training, which means these are highly accomplished practitioners who are still needing to train in patience. So if Bodhisattvas are needing to develop their patience further, so too clearly do we need to. That almost goes without saying. So for ourselves, we need to understand very clearly what is meant by patience, and we need to apply ourselves to learn these reasons and reflect on them again and again so they become integrated, because through relying on reasoning, we will be able to respond skillfully in the moment. So first of all, what is meant by patience? Patience does not mean taking what life throws at you. Patience means ensuring that one's mind does not become disturbed in the face of what life throws at you. It's about dealing with our response. And in particular, because we can look at response in two ways. There's what we say and do, but what the training of patience is primarily focused is on how we emotionally and mentally respond to the adversity. This is the training in patience. So it certainly does not mean being a doormat or willingly accepting everything that people throw at you. For example, if a thief enters your home or you mugged, the practice of patience isn't necessarily saying, here's my wallet, here's my PIN code, take it all. That's not being patient. Being patient is guarding your mind so that the afflictions do not arise. Or if they have arisen, you notice that and you subdue them. You don't let them influence you. That is the practice of patience. And in the case of being robbed, what you are primarily, as a practitioner of the Buddha Dharma, what you are guarding yourself against is not the loss of material possessions. It is against the loss of virtue that comes from the mind becoming disturbed in the face of adversity and anger in particular arising. The skilled practitioner knows that what has real value is their virtue. It's not what has arisen from their virtue, such as their material possessions. This is what the skilled practitioner is guarding, their mental response to life's adversity. And that is the practice of patience. Because as we saw earlier in the chapter, as the translator I think was around the 11th verse, the cause for patience, the cause for anger, is the mind becoming unhappy or slightly disturbed. So going from a place of either happiness or tranquility, ease, to a place of disturbance, unhappiness. From that then, annoyance, frustration, anger, rage will come. So this is why the practice of patience does not mean being a doormat. It does not mean just taking what people throw at you. It means dealing with your mind. And the further outcome of dealing with one's mind, in other words, ensuring it doesn't become afflicted, is when a mind is afflicted, or to the extent a mind is afflicted, virtuous qualities, in particular that of intelligence or wisdom, are suppressed. So if one, for example, is angry, you're not thinking clearly. You are overwhelmed by annoyance or rage. You're not thinking clearly. Therefore, you cannot make good decisions. You cannot recall these trainings. You cannot think of a skillful way to deal with your mind, let alone respond. So therefore, practice of patience means ensuring the mind stays undisturbed in the face of adversity. So let's continue now with the 74th verse. For the sake of my desires, I've been roasted in hell and had thousands of other such experiences, but no personal benefit nor any benefit for others have I thereby achieved.
Di 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 tu channel chik chaw mo che da so da telepashi mission da pashi na da telepashi to kon langirwa atenga ngi che ba nyo so chi pashi se kon la da kon la alen yu di shan ya ne bi ya lo so ba shan ko ho ta ya lo so shan jun shi ba lo so tu chene dene je da chike dene ge la cha dene ge di da le ya ga da para je shin din chik ti ba mong bu sa shin Dene digi debu nga sol ma jeda, nyawal ma jene sela so sede, nyawe chanyi dunga nyongo yada, ne jangwe dunga nyongo la so bada. Dene ki ta dunga newe dunga bado meba na so bada, dene ki dundre dunga nyongo. Dundu sene bado meba nyongo jene, nyawe dunga lo tongcha ma lo so nyongo jene, dusi nyongo juwa nyongo debare yeso, nyawa nyalo tongcha nyongo la nyongo gyur kya, dene ki nyongo dade bar dusi debare yeso ure.
Look in the first two lines, for the sake of my desires, I've been roasted in hell and had thousands of other such experiences. So here, immediately we being taken across an expanse of innumerable past and this present lifetimes, recognizing that for the sake of desires, or to express it differently, out of attachment, one has accumulated so much non-virtue and experienced so much hardship. Because when our attachments or our desires are frustrated, what happens? Anger comes. It's like that. These we've had listed in the various presentations on suffering. For example, the suffering of meeting with the unpleasant. You meet what you don't want, so your desires are thwarted, then one suffers. Anger is likely to follow. Likewise, the suffering of separation from the pleasant. What you want, you can no longer be with. And frustration, anger comes. The suffering of not getting what you want despite trying. The suffering, and then as well. And then, of course, the ripening experiences in the lower realms, as the hells and the spirits and the animals. These all come about in dependence on karma created, particular non-virtue. And where it's anger, it is going to have been followed by, preceded by attachment. Our attachment being obstructed in some way, things not going the way we want, and so forth. And in this way, we've experienced so much hardships because of our attachment and resulting anger.
이내다 라다기 랑기 된다니 생유 돼야 마셔서 시다 되네게 제발때 이내 나대 봐도 소수기 된다 뒤투요 말해서 다기 된세들 랑기 된세 다기 소소랑랑기 되네 자와 같이 뭐 내가 되네 빠도면 봐 제발 다대 봐 제발때 랑기 된 야고 투투요 말 랑기 된 가서 랑기 디기 랑은 대화 동화 타자도 줘 안에 띵이 대화 토야 돼 톱투요 말 봐. 그래서네 세보고요 말 봐. 세보 먹은 말 봐. 그래서네 소식이 뒤에 주비하게 된다리야. 전에 뇌바치야다. 현이 될래 또 빠셔지 될 코로나제 될 뇌바치 도치네. 지금 세보고 냠는 맞게 봐 인자 수림다 세보 먹은 봐 인자 근데 랑게 뒤에 코비 동화 타달을 줘야지 탈바셔야 돼. 띵이 되와 돼. 톱투요 말에 코비 동화 뒤에 세투요 말에 안에 코비 동화를 줘야지. 근데 띵이 되와 돼. 톱투요 말에 랑기 소소랑기 랑기 된다디 동화 탐제 좋아다 띵이 되와 톱투요 말에 랑기 된다니 해야지.
So an account of one's attachment where you have accumulated so much non-virtue, and this is amplified when our attachment is obstructed because anger arises. And this has been happening for lifetimes. And the result of that is, third and fourth line, but no personal benefit, nor any benefit for others have I thereby achieved. So what I've translated as benefits can be expressed in several ways. This word can be expressed in several ways. Our own aims and the aims of others haven't been achieved. Meaningful goals for ourselves or the fulfillment of meaningful goals for others, none of this have we achieved. Why? Because of our afflictions, our attachment, and our attachment being impeded, leading to anger arising. And in this way, our virtuous activities of ethics and patience, they too are impeded. And in this way, we have not achieved our own benefit, nor that of others.
지사 내가 두도 말했어. 내 맛에 다 생기 돼야 맞지소스. 지사 랑기 된 탈바다 띵이 되와다 한 녀모바 탐제단 자위게 자와 Java, Dingy, Deva top 2 Mare, Di Maduba Maze, and the Shen you doing the Canis to Shen Simjet Tamji, Dungan and Java, the Simjet Tamji, Digi, Yako, Dunga Tada, Tarbi, Gova, Tamji, Gova, good 2 years, Shen you doing, and the cabaret and Sanji Gova to get in the Tobio Marawas, Shen you doing a magic to Geoma, they to be good, Yamne Geoma, or that Shen you doing a magic sauce. Shen Simjet Tamji. Shen Simjet Tamji call it Dunga, the Sanji Sala Goya, Dundala, Sanji Gobato, Shen Dun Chigoro, Chesan Shen you do, and Shen you do, say Shen you do, Tardo Sanji Gopati, Dia Tobia Gusayo Mares, Gusago Mares, Tobio Mar, Tobi Guyan Sayo Mares.
The personal benefit that we have not achieved, despite over lifetimes engaging in innumerable various activities from which we hope to attain happiness, we have never achieved the lasting, stable state of happiness that is liberation from samsara. In fact, we are still so far from that. And likewise, in terms of the benefit for others, we haven't been able to lead them to attain freedom from suffering either. We haven't had such a transformative impact on others either. And this again is despite over countless lifetimes we engage in activity after activity, always hoping to gain happiness. And that happiness has only ever been fleeting. Never have we achieved lasting happiness for our own benefit, nor the benefit of others.
Dewa Dunga Midushe, Di Dewa to be a Dunda, Dunga say Dunda, and then Karichigora Sene, and the Susuki Dewa to Yale Parsichia, Susi Dunga say Ala Parsichuna, Lamsa, and never chicken to Parsichuna, Delia Corla, and then Chiki Delia Corla. And the Chik Negi, and Shanley, never Sambakia, Rangi Tiki to Dunga say Dundala, Shengi Jala Kumokua, Shanley never Gia, and Chik Torchum Chiala, so that's how I Chiala, so not so Jungo, what is this just I did what depending on the community, some god, Kumakuya Dikine, Sosarangi Tiki to Dunga say Dunda Kumaja or Monsieur Diki, and the Jimmy Shanley, same Jiki Diki, and the chick Pinzu Pazo, Marshal Jay, Shan Kohortaya, no course reason, Chasam, do some time, to share some time, the Chasa, Sosugi dig you together, Sosu Dunga say, Dundala, Chichigorova. She said, in a Chigore, Legati, Dunga Yoya, Kudichigore, Gangas Ma Yoyati, Jegora. Chesa Dineza, that about do Chevare, Chesa, Sosugita. Tarbotoya and the Sudim Song Sevocom, and the Chig Janjusim Yukunela, and the Chig Dini Chimba Sudim Sevocombaina, Chisa Sanjoko to be Kuchaya, that is Chisa Dine Majavaza, Rangi Duen Tarba Tamji Kimbokova, Rangi Duen Tarba, Tarba Toyo Tobio, Martini de Toy, Gusayo, Toyo Mare, and Shen you do Simja Tamji to Sanjoko Tobic, Guya Sayama, Toya de Paso, Guya Sayamara, Masabi Gimzendi, Chisa Denigi, Yomo Be Shamado Sonche, Lega. Tatapa to Lord Drangak Lord Dranglet Jebarete, and then want to dinner Sama to become Zendires, just a Subamacom became Zendires, as you soon over that.
Here we recognize that despite trying and wanting, we have not been able to achieve lasting happiness for ourselves or others. And we are actually still so far from this. And we can look at this, the way here to look at this is to recognize how do we deal with unwanted circumstances? How do we deal with obstacles? Our way of responding to the wide variety of obstacles that we experience is with aversion. We try to push it away from us. We have a repulsion towards what we dislike. This means through we are likely to be giving a rise to a form of anger, perhaps anger itself, or a mind of that class, pushing away this obstacle. And this, therefore, has meant we've not only engage in activity that leads to harm, when we push away what we dislike, we'll often do so with harsh speech, unkind speech, unskillful speech. It is also what happens as the prelude to violence, physical aggression. And then, from the perspective of the practitioner, when one pushes away, one is likely to harm one's ethics. Certainly it's not going to be practicing patience, nor joyous perseverance. And in fact, it impedes the cultivation of all good qualities. But if we apply ourselves to the many reasons presented here to train our mind in patience, so that we become confident in dealing with our mind in the face of life's frustrations and annoyances, so that we recognize them in the way that a skilled practitioner does, as an opportunity to radically transform their mind, opportunity to be of benefit to others. Then, these same encounters are not experienced as obstacles anymore. And this is a way to radically change the stream of our lives going forward.
Dunga dordio semyo ya dunga nila wambar gyukse so sugi chik tuhedi dunga dorya ge semba sam tangore chizada dunga dorya ge tablam dela karchi warsin dunga yoya ge gyudi chi gore yes dunga dordio semyo ya junju di ganga le ga mambo de kar ne di simo jo ne ji de donda malap shan ji goro manju kar sungol sene doela dungaji 소수가 강한데 세와 두고레스 세상 소소 강한 세 don다라 세도 dunga들도 세미야 소수 dunga데 세에게 되어요레스 dunga들도 세미야 다 dunga도에 don다라 내가 가르치고 그랬으면 dun가 영향을 끼치고 그래서 dun가이랑 거 봐주세요 dun가 영향을 끼치고 그래서 이로 와도 미잖아지 소소를 소소 강한 세야 되는데 파콘란 거로 봐 두고자 거로 봐 내려와 제자다 소수기 되는데 소소 강한 봐 제사 소수기 제사야 동야다 되니게 이제 변조도 강하였나 야 미션다기 디강아 세야 된다라 같이 올서 미션다기 지고 구마게 걸어봐 구마게는 동아 영역 주사 걸어봐 제사들이 동아들도 쓰면 동아 이런 거 봐. 육세대 도시래제
This calls to mind for me a verse covered earlier in the chapter. So as the translator, I don't have it before me, but the meaning of that verse is, behind many of our activities is the wish to eliminate problems, to avert problems. But through our afflicted behavior, instead of averting problems, our endeavors just leads to creating problems. In other words, we act, we speak, we act, we think in a way that we hope will remove a problem, remove an obstacle, make our life better. But in the end, we make more problems. Where this is clearest is when our response is one of the class of anger. So anywhere from frustration and annoyance all the way up to rage. What we are wanting to do is avert an unwanted circumstance. Hence, this mind of aggression, of anger, is pushing away this particular situation we find ourselves in. But we are just creating non-virtue. So instead of thinking, instead of clearing away our problems, we are creating further problems. And this is not just in our way of thinking, but this is seen in the world through the ways of acting. Wanting material possessions, instead of going about it in a wholesome manner, people may steal, they may cheat, they may take advantage of others. Or this would be a motivation for violence. So again, wanting to eliminate problems, through our afflicted thinking, we end up creating further problems.
Dini desam nemen la tuanchen da yang zhugyurpe zhuyu nesel dungan la gawa bashi dirja riks.
That brings us to the 75th verse. This now is so slight that is hardly painful, yet can achieve what is greatly meaningful. Through the suffering, the pain of migrators is dispelled, and thus is appropriate to embrace this practice with joy.
Ranglia and the Jig Dunga Gangate la so Nevikia la sopata, the Genji Sosulia and Dunga la sopa, Yovena, de and Denigi Dunga Nuati as Dunga some Davina and Navi Dunga Savi Dunga, Navi Sanya Dunga, Dani Dunga, Ida Dunga, and the Dundre Dunga la sopa some Davina, Denigi and Denigi Nevi Dunga to get Chunchur. Desam Nimela, Dinashin, never knew such Chibukai Mares, been uni do some time and I never do I said, Ida you do not never do a bottom of Unibun Yongova, do you some time and then Jig Moe some time Jing Dunga de Pemasi Sapchimushu, Chambushu, Yongwa Chagorova. Says that thing I said some time and that Dunga didn't she never get to sometimes do in that two race. Just never substitute something never change. Just Dinigi, Master Kanga Sedelia, Dinigi to Kanga Unadi, Yavada, Dinigi some time and the Chunjures, Kamares or Desam Nimela, Dinashin never Chimukai Mares or that.
So the first line, this now is so slight that it is hardly painful. So this presents a way, a beneficial way to relate to all that's unwanted that arises for us. It's referring to every problem, suffering, and difficulty of this life that we experience. It's a way of thinking to recognize every problem, suffering, and difficulty we experience is really slight. And when looked at realistically, we see that it is really a meaningless problem. And we come to recognize that all these things that we complain about, that go around in our minds so much, that dominate our thoughts all too often, is nothing when compared to what others are experiencing. And in particular, when we think about the sufferings that beings in the lower realms are experiencing, most clearly with those in the hells, but also spirits and animals too. What we experience is nothing like they experience, differing in two ways: the duration and the intensity. The intensity and the duration of what is experienced in the lower realms is incomparable to what a human will experience. By taking this to heart, we will be able to have a far more realistic and balanced way to approach what we experience, not have it overwhelm us, not inflate the severity of what really, in all reality, is slight and insignificant.
Ane shengi nebe kiba la sopa che chumba ne dele ya ane nebe le jime nyembe sembe neje dele neje de ya ane ko nyomo be shawa do soba re nyingje sembe ke nyingje samda kola chamba de nyingje samda dele ya pa khoro mal ba sebo kom chisa rangi penerangi chue nyemle sheba ya chu chi kanga subol kanga thena kanga dando lemba la sopa da andine dando lemba oda dine dando le le an shen le roba che ya da so chu nyemle sheba la kanga thide kanga dike ta chi le ga ma du be kanga chi ke dine ke ba che ya da kanga du kanga dike dando le nyemle che sebo kom dine ke shen yu ne ba che ba la so chu de shen ne ba che yen de le ko nyomo ba sha wa yin je sembe ke yin je sam da che ane chi ne ba le ji ma ni be sebo kom dine 동안 세우고 이제 되네 이게 심지어 탐지기 된다리야 산조고 바토비 주도 뒤에서 봐 진념된 제에 배하고래 선배서 봐 다운도 렌지 동아 다운도 렌바 뇌발에 지면이가 섬 서버 공부이나 제자데 서버 공부이나 안에 가리어스네 뇌멜라 된전 다장 두규베스 제사 되니 수업 공부는 수업이 냠면 뒤 뜻이 아니 샘자 탐주기도 산요고와 토백이 토요 규사고레스 제사 산요고와 토백 6월 마오바데 타년로 산요고와 토백 6월에스 제사디 배야불에서 된전다죠 두개자스 두규베스
Looking at the first two lines. The first line presents a skillful way to think about every harm that you have experienced and likely to experience, whether the harm is coming from one of two sources, from others, or from oneself. Oneself in the sense of what arises in one's mind, so from one's way of thinking, or from how others are acting or talking to you. So this is included within the patience of willingly accepting suffering, or the patience of embracing suffering. And one is able to do so by radically transforming how we think about problems, suffering, and difficulties. And by being skilled in this, one will not respond in kind when receiving hardship from others, but will rather respond with kindness. Because one will recognize that the person who's acting towards you in an unskillful manner, their mind is dominated by their afflictions. They are acting in this way because they are not thinking realistically. They are seeing whatever issue they are upset about as being of far greater importance than it really is. So if you've trained your mind well, you'll recognize the role the afflictions are playing in deceiving this person, in deceiving them to act in a way that will not clear away suffering, but will create far more suffering. This then means that one will respond with patience, with love, compassion, and wisdom for the suffering being. Likewise, in other circumstances, when one is helping others, either where one's volunteered, you've seen an opportunity and you've offered, outstretched your hand, offered support, or when support has been requested and you've been taken for granted or not thanked and so forth. Here, if one is skilled, one will focus on the opportunity one received to help and not be bothered by the expression of others, the expression of the afflictions of others, but rather be focused on how fortunate I am to have this opportunity to help others who are in need. And that whilst this response is not ideal, it means that I'm purifying as well as accumulating virtue by having helped. So this is a skillful way to think about life's challenges. And then this leads into the second line. It's by thinking this way that you can achieve what is greatly meaningful. Because you recognize, because I've been training in these many reasons presented here, I can see now I have a better understanding of how to respond. I am purifying personal virtue, accumulating virtue, and therefore I know through my practice, through my developing practice of patience, the cultivation of bodhicitta is nearing, and Buddhahood itself is drawing ever nearer. This then will give one great strength of mind. You'll know then you're living a life that is greatly meaningful.
니가 세보 공부에는 다 지금 미팅바 영야 축구제 영마로다 전부 툴라며 제가 툴부연다 는 디기도 용거로 제사디네 제사다 랑게 돼 주에 랑리아 직생기 된다래 레가리아다 소소게 냠내자 강아티도 게 디네기 지게 강아동아티게 다도래 세보 공부하다 셴리아 아니 펜버두야래 셴디 지베레가리아레 셴리아 펜버두야게 디네기 제두갈 바르시 중요하라서 봐데 디네 균제 제하나 봐나 델리아 네발레 지만님 말씀 세보 공 뒤베 쇠베 냠내제다 어다 셴리아 펜베 체도 있으면 삼다 두번 제베나 다 쇠베 냠내제 전슈심 요군이라 디네 쇠베 냠내 제베나 아니 지게 된제 다장 두규베스데다 먼저기 세델레나 진행합기 디기 용야래 안디면 된 첨보 랑된 첨보데 셴된 첨보세 고래 랑된 첨보세에 랑이 녀모 바샤다 제바 빵바 되네 빵베기 똑똑토야 되네 시제마 시지 내로 말리바 탐제 캠비기 똑똑토야 지단 빵베 연된다 최 탐제 캠기 남켄세 저로와 하고야기 똑바로와 방배연다 똑배연다 시로와 제자디 랑된 차고 제자 랑이 거기 두견 탐질에 되제 아니 지마 탐질 자와라 방배연다 토비야데 되 랑된지 되네 랑이 쉐 탐지 응어숨데 캠바디 아니 캠배연다디 랑된 랑이 마신 바데 저거 랑이 연대데 랑된 디소 된체 뭐 랑이 연대 토비야 다 현대 주바이라 현대 수규구다 롱주 소부 구세의 구 남바된 현래 최된 세sem제 강하세야기 대기를 거야 타바탐지 요구 방로 거야 현대 요구 누구세다 롱고세기 봐된 어디도 된신 다냐 주바교로서 된체 봐 근데 타도 된체 봐라된 최고당 현대 수구 니데는 주투리에서 제단님네 주바 중국에서 오래
By training repeatedly over a sustained period, becoming skilled in these topics, and starting to recognize that one's way of thinking and thereby one's way of responding is changing, this will give you a great sense of confidence. You will come to recognize, still with the second line, that you are achieving what is greatly meaningful. Because as one is developing a patient's outlook, patience itself becomes linked or is developed in dependence with many other good qualities. So if one is starting to recognize one is being more patient, you will also know you are becoming ever more ethical. In other words, your mind is restrained ever more within the bounds of what is ethical from the afflictions. You're becoming ever more loving and compassionate with others, as well as your wisdom is growing. These and many other qualities are interrelated with patience. They are developed together. So therefore, one will have confidence. I am living a life that is greatly meaningful. Moreover, the way you think of others, the way they appear in your mind, as well as the way when you meet them they appear in your mind, will start to be very different. You'll feel a tenderness, a warmth towards all others, the sense of closeness towards them. This will come through developing these good qualities. And therefore, this will also aid your practice of patience, your capacity to willingly accept suffering. Why? Because the suffering being before you matters to you. So in this way, confidence grows that I am living a life that is greatly meaningful. Linking now this line to what we saw in the previous verse, in terms of one's own benefit or personal benefit and the benefit for others. In particular, if your heart is set on becoming a bodhisattva, that means, at least intellectually, you'll want to become a Buddha for the sake of all beings, which means you'll want to arise as the bodies of a Buddha. So therefore, you'll recognize, as the Dharma is arising within you, that you are developing all excellent qualities as well as eliminating all faults, which means you're developing you're continuing developing your mind, and you know you are progressing towards the generation of the Dharmakaya, the quality for the ultimate quality, the supreme quality for one's own benefit. And in terms of the benefit for others, likewise one will recognize, I'm developing the form bodies, the Rupakaya and the Sambhogakaya, the two bodies of the Buddha, so that as a Buddha I can be of benefit to others. So this then is linking, living a life that's greatly meaningful, bringing ever closer the goal that is greatly meaningful for one's own personal benefit as well as the benefit of others.
Isa dene zada chike rangi dungalia ane dongda dangdu libu sebata ane chike shengi nevalia ane nejelia jambata nije komje ane nevale jimeni be sebo kombate cheza dene ge kombaina dene kombati cheza da twenchen tubi gyuri chagido wa dene sa dene ge twenchen tubi 드위 뇌실 동아라 가와바시 dircharik 세단 조와 데니게 냠네 제반나 조심자 탐지기 뇌 동아 탐지기다 뇌비게 nyomo ba 탐제다 디 제부 농아 탐지를 좋아지바 샬리아 판도 줍투에 인규 안 되네게 세번 냠내제 빼야고래 삼백에 되네게 딜에 랍쳐지 민도아디 빼야고래도 삼백에 돼 누신의 삼다제 빼 갈라라 제네 누신의 갈라라 제네 디르샤 릭세드 제자다 랑게 동아 다들레 베셔바다 동아 녀발레 지만이 베셔바데 냠내제나 빼야고래 냠내 제고래 제초고래 젠 제아디 스고래 제고래 제나리 디르샤 릭세데 네. 주위 내서 동알라 가와바시 드리샤릭스. 대단히 진행이 동아 당랭이 쇠바도 네발레 지면이 쇠바 코미야기 쇠베 냠렌디 조와심제 탐제기 동아 뇽모바 네바세스 뇽 네제 뇽모발로바 세와 제바데 디지부 동아 타네데 주에제 조지 지고 지비 규리 지단디 세 투고레 디네다 디네 냠렌제 페야고레 가와스네 베지아 셈라 가와 곰제 아니 뇽모디 다도레 지 쇠베 냠렌제 오레 에세지
Looking at the second, third, fourth lines. So as one is training in the practice of patience, which again, being a practice that's interrelated with so many other good qualities, in particular that of ethics, love and compassion, one will be able ever more, through developing a warmth, a tenderness towards others, ever more easily willingly accept the suffering one encounters, whether it's from others or in terms of one's own way of thinking, one's own inner turmoil. So one will recognize that one is becoming ever more ethical, loving, compassionate, and patient. This means you will recognize you are living a life that is greatly meaningful, and you are drawing ever closer the actual attainment of goals of the Dharma which are greatly meaningful, such as developing bodhicitta, becoming a Buddha for the sake of others. This means, now into the third line, through this training, so through this suffering, the pain of migrators is dispelled. So here, in the third line, through the transforming of hardships, through, for example, willingly accepting suffering, one is developing as a practitioner. One is developing in truly meaningful ways. And as one is radically transforming one's mind, one is both directly and indirectly having a positive impact on others, easing the pain of migrators or dispelling the pain of migrators. Because the way that we benefit others, the way that we help others, is by transforming our mind. And it's from this transformed mind that we transform our relationships with others, and therefore we transform the impact that our words and our behavior has on them. So this is how, through training in these good qualities, one transforms one's mind, thereby transforms one's relationships with others, and thereby helps dispel the suffering that migrators experiences. Recognizing this transformation within you, recognizing the transformation in the relationships you have with others, not just when you are in their presence, but also when you're experiencing challenges and when others come to mind, how they come to mind. When you're seeing this transformation, you'll recognize this transformation within you. And this then will lead now into the fourth line, and thus is appropriate to embrace this practice with joy. This will lead to great joy arising within you, because you'll recognize that you're no longer harming others, but you are benefiting them. So this means you will experience what previously would have been problems, what would have previously been experienced as suffering, what previously would have been experienced as difficulties. You're experiencing them now with a joyful heart, with an embrace. You are no longer pushing them away, but you are, with an embrace, transforming them. In this way, you know you are living a greatly meaningful life. This then And this then brings us to the 76th verse, and a new sub-outline. If a person who praises another's excellent qualities gains the happiness of a joyful mind, why, mind, do you not praise them and consequently make yourself joyful too?
Kola tyonga tawe na mi ti yakpo yorata mi yende yakpo yorata pe mi semba sangpo yore jimi lega yakpo lega pe yakpo yore se tyonga tawe na nganzu gaga marwa da nganzu ki semba jiwa da jik yungurwa jisa shenji yunde dendue na se odi se wora shenji yunde dendue na se do shen soso de masa soso nebeke soso magasa yuji le ya mi shenda ji ko le ya an ji pe mi di ne ya wo yore mi di sang bo yore pe ya wo yore se pa ji du se ne tyonga ta be na tyonga ta ko ron le ya ane ji 갈데 가위 대접나시데 지사 뚱아 호라땅에 뚱아 땅 코론리아 미델리아 뚱아데 코론리아 셈 가우용 거로 가네 뚱아 땅 거로 야포레스 지사 코론리아 셈리아 디기 중고로 와시고래 갈데 대접나 지니 네 뚱아 땅서 유디에 있네 코랑알리아 뚱아 땅알리 연데디 나데네 연데 유바지 때 야고 레도 와서 코론이나 가와시용 거로 와다 지사디 뚱아 땅서기 가사 코론리아 가와 용고래 그래서 영화도 그 현대도 콜리아 뚱아 땅과 디진제 콜라 가와리 거래. 세 뚱아 땅에 가서 코로나 이 코로나리아 지금 현대 통화에서 콜라 가와지에서 셈마기와 연구 말에 셈배 가라라. 지디 투고로 와지래.
So here we start a new subsection, developing patience when those one dislikes are praised. So this is the meaning of the first two lines. If a person who praises another's excellent qualities, so this person being praised is someone we dislike. So we know what happens when someone we dislike is praised. In particular, if they are praised for qualities we are quite certain they lack. So if it's someone that we see as quite a hideous person is praised for being kind-hearted, we are going to immediately feel a sense of, at least, disquiet. And we're probably going to think, if only you knew this person like I did, if you only knew the truth like I do. So what we are seeing here is a very negative response to one person merely praising another. And this is in particular exacerbated because the person being praised is someone we dislike. So in reality, now into the second line, gains the happiness of a joyful mind. The person who is praising is doing so from a place of joy. So they are praising from a place of joy. And the person who is being praised, they are receiving the praise, and almost certainly joy is arising within them. They like having their qualities pointed out. And the person who's pointing out those qualities is doing so from a good place. So both of them, the praiser and the praised, are both experiencing joy. Us, who is not particularly involved other than observing, our mind is anything but joyful.
Jisanda Koromi Shandagi, the Niki, Tungatanga, Tungatanga, Korolea, and the Yikawa, and the Yungore, Tunga Tansaki, Kansa Korolea, and then I ended the temper in the Tunga Rasmus and Pikawa Yunguduas. Jesa Yi Kujan and Ditunes, and around to get some nola, that Magawa Kido, Kajan Macha Kiora, Karoin, and around to some, that Yi Kiss, and around to some Lutisure, that Aranjunes, and Pa, Jun Matavaji Delia, Tunga Tangores, Karsin Dong. 이 교육자네 대퇴네 지시를 대달 가면서 델야 현대를 되바 되시는 되바지 되니게 아니 소소히 셈 대나라지 되네 지기로 와서 셈 마기와 저거면은 셈 대나라지 되네 지기로 와서 제국으로 와서 지시를 대달 가면서
Here we encourage, as in the third and fourth lines presented, to address this attitude of ours, address ourselves. Why, mind, do you not praise them and consequently make yourself joyful too? Because we are observing this interaction of two happy people, one praising, one being praised, and we are the one who's suffering. Why? Why? Why do not we not join in and also be that all three of us can be joyful?
Isada ngazi ngala nebe kiyenre ngala kanga tere kola gare dewa tango tenga chore samson dingiru hada chesa tangala du smare dinig tenga chese de misudu suina koran kyungi chaje yenden chaji ni yongore chesa tangala dule kanga teke nebe kiyenche ngala dule magang jine koran le yenden cha yorwa de yenden chaji da korangi 년에도 그런 분야 현리야 그런 거 가서리 로버체데 야고로 와서 그런 미 연대되는 두어 판도 야고저 미 펜버두야다 내신 안지 미 현리야 제와 제바데 배 야고로 와서 베게 삼다야다 되네게 연대자 삼다네 아니 콜리아 두시네 삼다네 아주 콜리아 안심 이 마지와티 기마라 마가와티 기마라 되네 삼다야 야직 되네 삼다야 되네 초진에 아도 그 말이야 네베기 배 야고로서 말이야 판도 싶어 준소스 그냥 알이야 너베기지 알이야 세변냠네 지야라기도 그런 거네 다네 알이야 너베기야 돼 그런 미코라라 나와요 막 그런 녀몽배 상관도 소와리 니지에 삼비 니지고 지다 그런 게 알이 너베기는 가 그런래 니지고미야 고고브라다 되네 서버고미야 냠네 지 고고브라 빼면서 야보 중소 알이야 판도 쉬우 중소 그 제산 딩아 세변냠네 지야다 니지냠네 지야셔베다 잼니지 냠네 지야바 디 냠네디 삼로디야 죽쳐줘야 디 냠네 지베게 라니 산지고와 토야라 다 녀줘야 라니 대디 냠네제 수배 냠네다 잠니지 냠네제디 세디나 디기 라라 디기 두고 디기 되고래 디 되고 마음반에 셴레 되어지다 라레 되어지고 두고 제가 빼면서 야고야 미디 다 디스등알이야 판도치 뭐 깨진 친구 이 선배게 되니게 삼다베네 지든 두스 삼다 연대 주변에 되네 소슬이야 셈이야 아니 갈라게 차고로 마도 미딜이야 빼 두셔 너버지 코르게 견주제야 콜레 세와제게 삼로 균내린 거 말아 제가 두시네 소수게 되네게 삼다제네 가오 공고리 세데 지실 때다 가면서 되네 삼다나 가오 공고리 가오 공부나 다 소소 산조 공부를 다 녀줘야 세데네 내가 되어 디기 탈두기 디기 주야다 아니 개연념네 자와 관계 공도 펴야 아니 미션에 만여봐 비행이네 디기 주야 미션에 토변 어디 미원에 관련 내버기스테 고sem바 상보제 세보고 빼냠네 약고 지기도 왔으면 미션에 있는 기체수 일하시네 개와서 도야 연구를 제네 제자 이케 세데 큐니 데 되네 지시되다 감미지 되네게 도지는 김선 삼다제 안 되네야 도시야 그래 선데 되바되다 도시에 가고 공고리스 진짜 되네 제변도 쇠변이면 잠니지 냠지 두고 어디 제고래서 나한테 송가
The skillful way to respond in a situation like this, when jealousy and other afflictions are likely to arise, the skillful way to respond will lead to one becoming joyful, as we see in the fourth line. So one needs to think clearly about the people that you currently dislike, or perhaps in the past have, and recognize that this person has good qualities, and if you think, you'll be able to see them. So firstly, we can recognize that every being who is not a Buddha has qualities and faults. Every being who's not a Buddha has qualities and faults. And if you are seeing those faults, nothing surprising there. They're not a Buddha, they have faults. Moreover, the way you think of them, the way you see them, is not how everyone sees them. Maybe you and your friends all dislike the same person, but not everyone dislikes them. Not everyone sees them as having the exact same faults you say they have. Moreover, there will be several people who deeply care for that person you dislike. There will be several people who deeply appreciate that person you dislike. This is always the case. And if you take that to heart, it will tell you that the way you see them is not the way they exist. You seeing them through a tainted lens. It's not how they are. If you think like this, it will serve to soften your mind. And if you have a poor relationship with this person, you need to do this many times. Moreover, a further technique is to recognize that, yes, in reality, the two of us, we don't have a good relationship. This is true. We have a relationship perhaps where there's regular conflict. But because I have conflict with this person, I am now sitting and doing this meditation. If we got on fine, I wouldn't be doing it. Which means, because we have a poor relationship, I have the opportunity to think, develop my intelligence, thinking about the good qualities this person has, and thereby develop my training in patience. I would not be able to train in patience in relation to someone I didn't have a bad relationship with. Therefore, because or in dependence on this person and our poor relationship, I am cultivating patience. I'm trying to see their good qualities. I'm trying to role play how I can better respond in the future, how I could have better responded in the past, and so forth. This means, by seeing this person now in a more realistic light, also seeing their good qualities, I am developing virtue, and I'm developing my patience. Therefore, in dependence on this person, I'm accumulating merit, which will lead to happiness in this life, and it will lead to good outcomes in lives to come. And therefore, in dependence on this person, I'm creating causes that is bringing the attainment of bodhicitta and even Buddhahood ever closer. As this is the case, how can I say this person is unkind? How can I say this person makes my life miserable? In dependence on this person, as well as my training, I can transform the stream of lives ahead. Thinking like this, suddenly the mind is quite uplifted. It becomes joyful. This is how one transforms how one relates to others. By training in this way again and again, and in the techniques mentioned earlier, one starts to experience the same things very differently. This is a mind that is being transformed. And a transformed mind in this regard is a joyful mind, a mind that is experiencing the qualities of the Dharma growing within. The 77th verse. This joyous happiness of yours is an unflawed source of joy. It was encouraged by those with excellent qualities. It is also the perfect way of winning others over.
야보레 셈비게 삼다야다 안데 제녀버 제바데기 미디 라메바 뇨모베 샤원도 소바 닝제세미 닝지오금 델레데네 아니 갈이야 세고 고미야다 잠제 고미야 고가 빼야고 중손 빼야고레 셈비게 삼다지 아니 제장에 되니기 냠내제네 셈제 탐사죠 고바 토바 지긴 셈비 삼다 요도 되니기 삼노디다 가와디 소술리아 가와 데셈리아 가랑라 유비티네 얌는디 근데 대화 탐지 중요해 내레스 세델레나 소소레 디기 중그래 뭐버네 아니 탈두게 대화 사지에 잔주스메 고바 토야다 탈두게 대화 아니 사지에 고바 토야디 대화 탐지 중요한 내지 규레스 탐지 기모 고바도 규레 제가 카나 마토 바레스도 메스도 디바 마레 개와레스 제가 개와 바지레 제가디 탈바다 가서 산지에 고바 퇴비기 안띵이 대화 안 산지에 고바 퇴비기 유 개와레스 said sikta boni di tisore kyye kawe dewa di tejung kanama to me said.
First two lines says, joyous happiness of yours is an unflawed source of joy. So this then is referring to the joy that arises within the practitioner who is training successfully in patience. The mind will become naturally joyful because the mind is abiding in happiness, meaning that when adverse circumstances are encountered, the mind is not overwhelmed by that adversity, but rather, because of the skill being developed, that adversity is transformed into the path. Therefore, adverse circumstances actually lead to joy arising. One isn't merely dealing with life's challenges, not getting upset. One is actually embracing challenges, becoming joyful at them. And moreover, when the adversity comes about in relation to one's interactions with others, one's heart, being open and relaxed anyway, will embrace this person. One will not be in any way upset by what they're saying or how they're acting, but will recognize that this person needs to be held close. They need to be emotionally embraced because they are afflicted, they are suffering, they are in pain, and they are expressing this pain through unskillful behavior. So this is why the mind is joyful, and this is an unflawed source of joy. So this unflawed is another way of saying virtuous. It is a cause that will lead to the eventual attainment of lasting happiness. And holding this in mind will only serve to enhance the joy that one experiences.
제자디 카나마도 발라는 디바세 카나마도 메바시도 다 디바마이 바게와세 고고르바 제자다 윤된 데바는 게낭스 윤된 데바는 게낭스 윤된 데바 잠니제 ene jambadan ziwe yunde de dembike sanje chumnen dedang ane jenju semba namgi yang dene ki nyamlen cheba de pe yakpo re se nawan cheba da ane dile ya ane ngaba nang go res na ju nang go pe yakpo re di jeo re desne man ya ngaba nang go res dus nang go res e ma se ane shendu pa yi cho yang yin se de rani dine nyamlen chedu shen rang li ya gawa komba de shen rang li debe jeba chedan rang go khor du ju ya ya cho tap cho du ba res chedan shen ya jam ni ji kom de ya sebo komba ne shen rang go on du ya khor du ya tap cho du ba di res chezada on du ya tap cho du ba yin ba na dang an ju gi so 지 원주바 소소야 가와데 소소리 대바 용배나 여배나 안 될이야 소소기 냠내제 소소기 냠내제 바데 냠내기 림바디게 바콜이야 시제 코냠소 렌제 되네야 사교고 고발이야 계기 다지게 판도 시안에 판도 주토 용고로 와 되네자 현주바의 초야인 세신 랑게 원도 뒤에 시안에 한 탑초도 규바디레스
지금 시pen양 숨베시고
니바시
So this term unflawed means virtuous, because we more normally come across a term similar to flawed, which means non-virtuous. The third and fourth line, it was encouraged by those with excellent qualities. So this then is referring to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So they, in their teachings, as well as through the example of their lived experience, encourage others to cultivate the mind of patience, and as well as the associated qualities that lead to the cultivation of patience. So this is the meaning of patience being encouraged. The way it's encouraged, again, is not just in teachings, but through a lived example. And it's through us cultivating patience and its associated qualities that we also become a living example of the Dharma. And through being a living example of the Dharma, by being patient with others who are suffering, the fourth line, it is also the perfect way of winning others over. In other words, by developing the qualities of the Dharma in our own minds, when we encounter suffering beings who surround us, we will have a positive influence on them, just like the great beings have had a positive influence on us. To the extent we develop these good qualities within us, when encountering suffering beings, our mere presence through the transformation of our mind will lead to their suffering easing. And in particular, when over time we are recognized as being someone reliable in the sense of we will not cause harm, we will not take advantage, we will not deceive. Others will rely on us. They'll be open and receptive to our positive influence. This is the way, through cultivating the Dharma, particularly in our context, patience and its associated qualities, it is the perfect way, or the most skillful of method, to win others over, or to positively influence others. And in particular, it's referring to those who are suffering in pain and who are expressing that by unskillful behavior to us or to others. And the way that we can have a positive impact on them is both to ease their suffering now and slowly over time. This is the most skillful method to have a positive influence to lead them to attain their own liberation from suffering.
rāngā kāngā chē yō tuyā, jī kāngā tāngdō lēn tuyā kāli khā pūrwa. Tēne zā tāngā tō nye lēn tuyā lē yu bē kāp liyā, tāngā tō chāngdō shē tuyā, jē sā sōsō liyā, shēn liyā pāndō tuyā tā, sōsō kī kī wē nyam lēn chē bā lā, tēne kī chī shēn liyā rōpa chē bā kāngā chē sō bā, tā kāngā chē bā nā, tī kāngā tī chōng chōng shū rō wās, jē sā tā tēne kāngā tī lā mā zēn bā chō khōng rō lā, nyō mō chē bā, dī kī tī bā sā, nye wē dungā, pā tō mē bā nyō ngā, nye wē dungā sam tā tā, sē tē lē tēne dungā tē pē chōng chō rō wā sam tā tē, tēne tē kā yō mā rā sā bē, tāng tō lē chē, anā nyam lē chī kē chū yā tā. An shen de ge shen yu ne ba la so ba ji la so ba so so ne ba che ba yin na de le ya an ji ge o da ne ba ga sa de le ya na ka yo ma ko nyo mo be sha wa do so wa re se bi ge da du shin na sam ta de ko le jan ba de ni ji ko 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 ma la de du kum gi ji gin sa be sam ta ya da de ne ge o da ko ngi de ko le se ko kum tu ba yin na an jan ba de ni ji ko me se ko kum tu ba yin na an ji so so ko ma la wa di bo ma sa wa an se ko kum ba da jam ni ji ko me du ndele tene sosoge gewa pato me basaya tarba ta tamni sanji goba tobige janju simi nyamlena sanji goba toya ya yu sagore an chedele digi gewa chimaine digi tardo sanji goba toya le gyusa be yaboya sanbege da denegi nyamsu lingi sanbege denegi sebe komtu ba jigin sebe du chene samda du jigin a jigin denegi samda jigin samda bena an du chene an chi soso sebe kombaina 지단 미션도 네버 집에나 될 소금드네 소소 셈rel에 차 안에 되네 차도 아니 미 tum부야야 안 미션다이나 안저 빼야고래서 미디 야고래셔지네 소소라 가와지야다 소소레 대바제리도 아니 뭐바네 춘차삼 tum부차야 이제 어디네 야고동도 셈비기 두 삼다 되네 지긴 셈비기 되네 강아 되네 천행에 삼다 되네 지긴다 디테네 되네 지긴다 셈비기 두시나 아주 장도를 야네 야도 삼다 장도를 제베네 되네 뭐 강아 체연을 함사 젠투로 젠투 되스다 세고금 투야기 연구로 다나 되네 시에도 하다 두시네
As I said at the outset of tonight's time together, Shantideva presents many reasons that we need to utilize to cultivate patience. Because merely repeating that I need to be patient will not lead to a transformation of our way of thinking. We need to transform the way we experience the world in order to actually transform ourselves. That is the process of transforming ourselves, of spiritually developing. The way to do it, the way to take these and the preceding teachings is when you're quiet, when you're relaxed, then you take these reasons and you apply them to your own lived experience. Call to mind problems that you've experienced and think about them through the examples presented here or the reasons presented here, and think to yourself, how could I have responded better? How can I understand that situation better? And in this way, reframe what you have experienced. And then, with that, when I encounter a similar problem again, how can I respond skillfully? And you repeat the process. So this needs to be done when the mind is quiet and relaxed. Because if you try and do it when you're upset, it's too difficult. The mind has already been overcome in the face of adversity. So when the mind is relaxed, we train. Then at first, if you train well, repeatedly, when you encounter adversity, intellectually, your mindfulness will recall what you're supposed to be doing. But by continuing your training, your mindfulness will recall what you're supposed to be doing before the afflictions get strong, and you'll be able to transform that adversity. So what the the reasons presented tonight include recall problems that you've experienced and remind yourself they are slight, they are insignificant. The truth is, most of what we've been upset about is long forgotten in your struggle to recall. So remind yourself, what you can recall is only a small portion of what has frustrated and annoyed and upset you. The vast majority is forgotten. That shows it had no real worth anyway. It wasn't worth getting upset about. Secondly, compared to what other beings in the worlds, in the realms are experiencing, it's really nothing. It is slight. It is insignificant. And reframe what you experience, the hardships you experience, in that way. And secondly, think about people that you have challenging relationships with. And reframe those relationships. Remind yourselves, these people have good qualities, others see them in different ways. They, even if we do have a bad relationship, they are giving me an opportunity to transform my mind. And I will take it right now. And there, in the quiet, in the still of your room, you think about this person's good qualities. You remind yourself, yes, they may have said or acted in unskillful ways, but they did that because their mind's dominated by afflictions. And despite wanting happiness, they created the causes for suffering. Thinking well like this, compassion will arise. And from that, appreciation for what the good this person is inadvertently bringing into your life. And in this way, by thinking about these challenging relationships again and again, you within yourself will transform how you see that person. So for you, in the very least, for you, they are no longer an enemy. You hold them close. You are warm towards them. And by you developing that within you, the other person will eventually pick up on that. And your relationship will change. Then thank you. Then we can conclude here for tonight and for this week. And then next week there's no class because we are away. So we'll be together again in 2 weeks in the Atisha Center. Thank you.